Chapter 160. Shizun, do you remember the voice-changing spell from the inn back then? At this, scorn surfaced on many of the guests' faces. Their gazes darted between Ye Wangxi, Nangongxi, and Song Qiutong. What a scumbag! Someone said softly. Why isn't Nangongxi angry yet? If Miss Song really didn't have a choice, then... for a girl like her to be caught between these two formidable gonzes, it's no wonder. What could she have done? As the man in black let these murmurs swell, posture indifferent, Tianwen lashed out and caught him off guard. Fortunately, he managed to jump swiftly out of the way, but though he wasn't ensnared nor seriously injured, Tianwen had managed to rip his cloak, sending blood into the air. He stifled a cry of pain and avoided Chuaning's willow vine with renewed diligence as he continued to besmear Ye Wangxi. Ye Gongzi, Miss Song won't confess because she's worried she'll damage the friendship between you and Nangong Gongzi. But you can't deceive the heavens. Have you really not an ounce of shame in your heart? Will you not bow your head and apologize for your wrongdoings? Incensed as Ye Wangxi was, he found this too ridiculous. I have committed no wrong, he replied. You haven't? So you're saying the blame lies entirely with Miss Song? Perhaps she didn't resist you because he threatened her. Are you trying to say it was she who seduced you, and not you who forced yourself on her? Nangongxi, who had remained silent all this time, turned and looked down at Song Qiutong, extending a hand to help her up. But Song Qiutong thought he was reaching down to check the chastity mark on her wrist. When she had woken that morning, she'd discovered the cinnabar had vanished from her skin. She'd immediately panicked, but she had no way to explain it, and any attempt would only make matters worse. She had imagined that since she was about to be wed to Nangongxi, and the cinnabar would fade anyway, it would be safe to say nothing for the next few days and avoid any misunderstanding. Who could have guessed that someone would come to ruin her? She thought about how Ye Wangxi had indeed saved her, and how she had served as Ye Wangxi's handmaiden. She also thought how the cinnabar had disappeared, and how the man had clearly identified the red birthmark on her leg. She had nothing with which to defend herself. Her mind filled with a buzzing blankness. She found herself cornered. Amidst the chaos, she raised teary eyes and took in the teeming crowd, their gazes filled with scorn and pity as they whispered among themselves. She saw Ye Wangxi standing alone, the guests peering at his solemn visage with disdain. Zhuzong's willow vine was still chasing the black-garbed man across the hall. It didn't stop the man from continuing to shout, Ye Wangxi, the grudges between us run deep. Today I'll expose you for the hypocrite you are. You had an affair with the young master's wife and forced yourself on an innocent young lady. How vicious, how reprehensible. As Song Qiutong stared, she saw, in a flash, her way out. Clearing her name now would be impossible, but the man in black sounded like he had a score to settle with Ye Wangxi, and was willing to go to any length to destroy his honorable reputation. She couldn't shoulder the crime of adultery, but if she went along with this tale and claimed Ye Wangxi had forced himself on her, then at least... That's right, it was him! She cried hysterically. Nangongxi's hand froze in mid-air. Standing stock-still and stupefied, he looked at her in astonishment, as if he couldn't believe his father's right-hand man would actually tarnish his fiancée. Hiding her face in her hands, Song Qiutong choked with sobs. It was Ye Gongzi who humiliated me. He forced me. I never agreed to it. Nangongxi stared at Song Qiutong beneath the flickering candlelight, his gaze likewise flashing bright and dark. After a long moment, he dropped the hand he'd offered back to his side. "Do you know what you're saying?" he asked, voice hoarse and full of sparks. When she saw his fury, Song Qiutong grew only more anxious. "Gongzi, I'm sorry," she wept. "I was afraid you wouldn't forgive me, so I didn't dare say anything all this time. I was so scared that you and Ye Wangxi would fall out if I said something. The sect leader values him so much. What good would it do Rufeng's sect if you two became enemies?" She prostrated herself as she spoke, her long sleeves sweeping over the ground as her narrow shoulders shivered, dejected and pitiable. "Qiutong really didn't know what to do. I didn't dare bring this up to the sect leader, so no matter how I was humiliated, I tried to hide it. Gongzi, I'm too ashamed to face you, but I've always been sincere with you." But Nangongzi, now deathly pale, took a step back, shaking his head as he repeated, Do you know what you're saying?" Song Qiutong's fine, dark locks cascaded over her beautiful shoulders, bending the light from the lanterns like silk. Like this, she looked all the more heart-renderingly lovely. "Qiutong was wrong," she sobbed miserably. "I shouldn't have hidden it from you, but I was so alone. Nangongzi cut her off with a ferocious snarl. "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" Song Qiutong shuddered and raised her head. Her perfect features were damp, her delicate cheeks streaked with tears, her lips trembling. How could you? How could you dare? How could you bring yourself to do something like this?" Everyone wrinkled their brows and exchanged glances. One of the guests murmured, "I'd heard Rufeng's sect favors men at the expense of women, but I never thought Nangongzi would blame Miss Song, an innocent victim, instead of Ye Wangxi. How disappointing. I say, he really doesn't know right from wrong." Chuaning had recalled Tianwen upon hearing Song Qiutong's admission, and now watched the scene in the center of the hall. Nangongzi's reaction bewildered him. In his memory, Nangongzi was willful and headstrong, but his conduct was always proper, and he wasn't an unreasonable person. If this story was true and worthy of investigation, then the target of that investigation should be Ye Wangxi, not Song Qiutong. And yet, all of Nangongzi's anger was directed at Song Qiutong alone. Why? In all the crowd, Mei Hanshue was the only guest sitting calmly in his seat, drinking his wine and watching the furor. Had Xu Meng been there, he would have seen that this Mei Hanshue was nothing like the man he'd run into earlier. The rakish personality from Peach Blossom Springs had returned. Contained in his eyes was all the dancing merriment of spring, and there was a smooth charm to his every move. Song Qiutong continued to weep and push all the blame for the scandal onto Ye Wangxi. Ye Wangxi, too shocked by her accusations to speak, stared wide-eyed at the woman he'd saved from Xuanyuan Pavilion. "Qiutong was weak and frightened in the face of Ye Gongzi's mistreatment. I would give my life to prove my innocence. Qiutong is but drifting duckweed. Gongzi gave me everything, and I know my mistakes. I will accept any punishment." After hearing her tearful confession, Nangongzi jerked his head up and closed his eyes. The lantern light, warm and lively, now illuminated the dark and stormy shadows on his face. His lashes quivered, as if he was struggling to hold himself back. His hands were balled into fists, and his throat bobbed like the raging waves in his heart. As he stood silent, his cheekbones jutted sharply, and the veins in his temples bulged. His bones shuddered, and his blood blazed through his body. He restrained himself until he could bear it no more. With a furious cry, he unsheathed his sword and cleaved the table in front of Song Qiutong in two. Cups and dishes scattered. "Song Qiutong, did you know the thing I've always hated? The very, very most? The thing I will never tolerate is lying," he abruptly yelled. "Ye Wangxi! Young master, Ye Wangxi, get over here!" Ye Wangxi didn't move, nor did he speak. Nangongxi turned his head, his eyes wet and red. "Come here!" Ye Wangxi came to him at last. Those watching expected Nangongxi might plunge his sword into Ye Wangxi's chest, opening the belly of this duplicitous beast in order to rip out his heart and throw it to the ground. They watched the scene unfold with bated breath. Chest heaving, Nangongxi stared at Ye Wangxi. At length he said, voice rough, "Remove the voice-changing spell." "Voice-changing spell?" The guests looked at each other in shock. What does that have to do with the voice-changing spell? No clue. How odd. Why would Ye Wangxi use a voice-changing spell? Is his real voice so awful it would scare people off? Or is it somehow embarrassing? Ye Wangxi dropped his gaze to the floor. "Young master, I can no longer remove it." Nangongxi stared at him blankly. "What did you say?" "I've used the voice-changing spell since I was 13. It's been 10 years. The spell has penetrated my spiritual core." Ye Wangxi paused, then continued calmly. "I can never recover my original voice." Nangongxi took a step back in astonishment. After a long moment, he turned his eyes on the inscrutable man occupying the sect leader's seat of honor. "Father?" A murmured question. Nangong Liu spoke at last. "Seer, it really is a pity, but Ye Wangxi used the voice-changing spell of his own volition. This turn of events has been unexpected. Don't take it too hard." "But..." Nangong Liu stepped down from the platform to stand behind the assembled guards, with his hand behind his back. "Your father knows that you and Ye Wangxi are childhood friends. I have appreciated his loyalty these recent years. Regardless, he has sullied Song Qiutong, forgotten his station, and deceived his superiors. These are crimes punishable by death." Against all expectations, Nangongxi's response was to exclaim in shock, "Father!" Nangong Liu waved his hand, and a ray of blue light shot out to enclose Nangongxi in a restraining barrier. Nangongxi stood frozen for a moment, then began to howl furiously and pound against the barrier. But it was to no avail. This was Rufeng sect's admonishment barrier, a technique passed down through the sect over generations. Rufeng sect had an unfortunate history of usurpation via patricide, and thus the sons of the sect leaders all signed a blood oath with their fathers in their youth. This barrier specifically allowed fathers to confine their sons and would stand firm for up to an hour. However powerful Nangongxi was, this barrier was impossible for him to escape. His words, too, were sealed within. Whatsoever Nangongxi yelled, there was no way for those without to hear it. Though things had come to this point, it was still preferable to admit to an affair between Ye Wangxi and Song Qiutong than to reveal other secrets of Rufeng sect. Nangong Liu approached the man in black and cupped his hands in greeting. "This humble one has no knowledge of what's passed between you and Ye Wangxi, but I am grateful for your reminders today. Otherwise, misfortune would have befallen my family. Nangong Jungman is too courteous, the man in black said blandly. Guards, arrest Ye Wangxi at once. Detain him. Hold it. Nangong Liu grew immediately uneasy. His face creased in an indefatigable smile. Sir, do you have more advice to offer? I was just thinking that your esteemed son only said a few words about a voice-changing spell. Sect leader, why are you in such a rush to lock up Ye Wangxi? This is a private matter of Rufang's sect, so I'm afraid I can't divulge details. The man in black's voice held a smile. When it comes to Rufang's sect's reputation, the esteemed sect leader certainly doesn't hesitate to sacrifice a pawn to save a rook. Poor Miss Ye, who has risked life and limb in service of your sect for more than a decade. Today she is framed, despite her innocence, all to preserve your family's dignity. Before the rest had time to process these words, Nangong Liu's expression changed. Mei Hanchu chuckled softly where he sat. He filled his cup with wine, drained it, and set it back down. In the glow of the lantern light, Nangong Liu's face was a waxy yellow. Finally, he asked with an insincere smile, Miss Ye? Sir, you. The black-clad man's eyes were bright, and his voice echoed clear through the great hall. He slowly said, Ye Wangxi isn't a man at all.